One of the most enjoyable parts of a trial for me is closing argument. Partly because I get to say what I want, partly because this is the opportunity to drive home your case, partly because only a rude prosecutor will interrupt you during your closing and juries don't like that, and partly because my client can't be whispering in my ear when I'm giving my closing argument because I'm not anywhere near him or her. I set up my closing at the beginning of my trial prep. Once I've thoroughly investigated the case, read everything I think I need to read, and I'm getting myself organized, that's when I plan my closing argument. I decide what is it that I need to tell the jury in closing in order to win this case. And then I work backward from that. What do I have to get into evidence in order to be able to make the closing that I intend to make? I'm also a very firm believer that you have to entertain the jury, and part of entertaining a jury is being a good storyteller. So I have a favorite story that I like to tell in closing argument. I don't tell it every single time because I don't want to be a one-trick pony. I don't want the prosecutors to know exactly what's coming so they can undercut it. But I did once tell this story during 8 jury trials in a row, and I won all 8. I'll do my best to tell it well today. I did once tell it so well that when the jury went out, the judge came down off the bench and asked me if it was a true story. And I just smiled and said, well, of course. It may be a true story. It didn't happen to me, and I stole the idea for this story from somebody else, but I made it my own. This is the spaghetti and meatballs closing. Sometimes when I want to annoy a prosecutor, I will tell them that I'm going to do the S&M closing because I like seeing the look on their face. So the spaghetti and meatballs closing, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to talk to the jury during jury selection about food. Some part of the conversation is going to be about food, about cooking, something like that. But I will stand up to give my closing. And during the course of the trial, I will have shown the jury several key things that are wrong with the state's case, several holes in their case, several things that they can't fix, couldn't fix. So here's the spaghetti and meatballs closing. I'll stand up and I will tell the jury, we really haven't had a chance to get to know one another very well because we've only been together for a day or two. And I don't know very much about you, and you don't know very much about me. But one thing you can tell about me just by looking at me is I like to eat. And I like to cook. And my favorite thing, I'm a fearless cook, but my favorite thing to cook is spaghetti and meatballs. I make a really good sauce, and actually I make my mother's sauce. And so whenever we would have company over, I would make spaghetti and meatballs and I would make my sauce. And yes, it is always better the next day. So I would make it a day in advance. And this is what I would serve to anybody that came over for dinner, except my parents. Because as hard as I try, I can't make my mom's sauce as good as she makes it. So when my parents come to visit me, I don't make her sauce. I take them out. And I know their favorite cuisine is Italian. So I take them out to one of my favorite Italian restaurants. I'm a regular there. They know me well. I get greeted by the owner when I walk in the door. I always get one of the best tables, one of the best servers. So one night I take my parents and my brother and sister, and my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law, and my wife, and we all go out to dinner at this nice Italian restaurant. And, the waiters are wearing their red jacket over a white shirt and a bow tie, and they have the cloth napkin over their arm. And there's sort of a hushed kind of silence, although you can hear the talking and you can hear the clattering of things in the kitchen. And, we're just sitting around having the family talk, the same talk that we have every time, the same talk you may have with your family, who's getting married, who's getting divorced, who's having a baby, whose kid's in trouble, who's sick, who's dying, who's dead, the family stuff. And during the course of the conversation, of course, our server comes over and takes everybody's order, and starting with my mom. And my mother always makes a real show of looking over the menu as if she were trying to find Waldo. She's looking at every single thing on there before she orders what everybody knew she was going to have, which is lasagna. That's my mom's favorite. That's what she's going to order. So she orders the lasagna. My dad, of course, orders chicken cacciatore. That's his favorite thing. If I could make that well, I'd make that for him. And we go around the table. It finally gets to my turn, and I just order spaghetti and meatballs. And, we return to the family talk. With my family, the talk at dinner is typically planning where we're going to go for the next meal. That's why I look the way I do. Anyway, we're having a very nice time. We're talking about my kids. We're talking about my brother's kids, my sister's kids. And all these great smells are permeating through the restaurant, and you can see the servers with their tray of dishes going by. And of course, everybody's thinking, well, I should have ordered that. I should have ordered that. Eventually, our dinners come, and the server delivers lasagna to my mother first. And then Dad gets his chicken cacciatore. And everybody gets their meal, and finally I get my spaghetti and meatballs, and I just can't wait. And right now I'm just drinking in the smells and the scenes of my family having a happy meal, a happy dinner together. And I watch Mom and Dad each taste their food, and then I lean over and I cut into the first meatball, and my mouth is watering. And I bring it up, and right before I put it in my mouth, I am hit with this god-awful smell. And I look down, and this meatball is rancid. I'm thinking, oh, God, what am I going to do? I don't want to make a scene at this restaurant. I'm not going to eat this. So I put it down, and as discreetly as I can, I signal for the waiter to come over. And he comes over, and he leans close to me, and he says, Mr. Kessler, is there something wrong? I said, yeah, this meatball is rancid. And he is taken aback, and he leans over, and he sees that I'm right. And he opens up the cloth napkin, and he takes my spoon, and he picks up the offending meatball, and he puts the spoon down, he wraps it up, he puts it in his pocket, and then he turns to walk away, and over his shoulder he says, there, enjoy the rest of your meal. That's what this prosecutor is asking you to do. She's asking you to ignore the rancid meatballs in her case and swallow everything else. And that, my friends, is the spaghetti and meatballs closing.